I think just the feeling we got walking through the school. Like, there's no bells and whistles, there's no computer lab, but you can feel the energy and you can feel the joy in the kids in the classrooms. And my husband and I both looked at each other and were like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like, we found our school.
Our kids were actually attending a public school, elementary school, down the street. We were looking for a more challenging environment for our kids. We didn't know what we were getting into. But literally within the first semester, we were all in.
As a public school educator for so many years, I was a never charter person. I realize now in hindsight that I had been fed a lot of propaganda about charter schools. And when I started actually researching it, I learned, oh, it's really what is best for the education of each child.
At Great Hearts, we love to form the hearts and minds of students through the pursuit of the true, the good, and the beautiful. Our students are going to read great books, from Frog and Toad in first grade to the Brothers Karamazov in their senior year.
We took a look at that book list and we were sold.
One thing that we had found in our public school experience is that we were constantly monitoring what our children were being assigned to read. And we really loved the book list at Great Hearts because we knew we were confident that they were being presented with material that was incredibly rich and would really trigger their imaginations and their love of learning.
The distinction of Great Hearts, as we saw it at that point, was that it would have the diversity that private schools didn't have, but then also an excellence in curriculum that typically one would not find in a public school.
Our aim is to raise up virtuous young men and women who have a sense of purpose and vision, who are endowed with a sense of destiny that's been shaped by the great conversation, and who are equipped to live it out.
Great Hearts does an incredible job of uniting and marrying the intellectual formation with moral formation.
One of the great things about Great Hearts is that it appeals, instead of what is most base in our human nature, it appeals to what is the highest.
For me, education isn't just about what you're learning in class, that academic-wise. It's the building and forming of character.
They're going to study and pursue those ennobling and lasting things with teachers who are intellectually, morally, and aesthetically alive.
The teachers at Great Hearts set an exemplary example. They go above and beyond in also demonstrating these virtues in their own lives.
There's so much to love about Great Hearts, but it all starts in the classroom. What I love about teaching is being in the classroom with my students.
This is a classical education, and for generations it's only been available at elite private schools. But we seek to make it available to all families, at least to all families who are willing to go on the journey with us.
One thing that we were pleasantly surprised with, actually, when we got to Great Hearts, is that not only is the curriculum itself unifying in that it all coheres, but it also is unifying in that it brings diverse students from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different cultures, and it unifies them through the pursuit of truth and through the reading of excellent material.
All the riches of the liberal arts, those which set their soul free, these are their rightful inheritance, their intellectual inheritance, and we endeavor to give them their initial possession of it.
I was initially drawn to STEM type schools because I thought I love science and technology and engineering and math. What I found out is that most of those schools really aren't STEM. What they are is giving kids a screen, which I don't think the science shows help them learn very well. But Great Hearts is they emphasize science and engineering and math. They give them all those things that actually will make them technology workers. So I think Great Hearts, even though it doesn't advertise itself as STEM, is truly one of the deepest STEM schools that you could go to.
We're going to an elite private school without the $30,000 price tag.
As a professor in a liberal arts college, I had met a few of the graduates from the Arizona schools that came, and they were impressive.
Great Hearts was the best decision we could make for our students' education.
As we continue to grow, we invite you to join us for the journey.
Hello, Great Hearts Harvest and community, and welcome to our virtual info session on the Great Hearts curriculum. It's a proven classical curriculum which changes lives and futures. As the parents said, it is truly private school quality, life-changing in that private school sense, but for free. Though it is only one part of our unique classical college prep offering, it is in many ways the most important. Our curriculum is, from start to finish, full of the best that has been thought, that has been said, written, calculated, measured, painted, and performed. When students are studying the best, the superlative best, something worthwhile, they have experiences with wonder, And wonder, as Aristotle tells us, is that passion which arises from the consciousness of ignorance. Or to paraphrase, when you know you don't know something, you have the drive to go and figure it out, to identify that which it is you do not know, And when students are animated by wonder, there are fantastic outcomes. I want to share a few of those with you, a few of our college results, Our students share an average of an 1,189 on the SAT. That's 129 over the national average. Our students score on average 26.5 on the ACT, which is 6.2 points over the national average. 96% of our students immediately attend college, and nearly 80% get merit-based scholarships when they attend colleges. And 51% of them pursue STEM degrees because they truly have that animated spirit of wonder. They want to know that which they don't. They can learn in any environment. And before I introduce some special guests, I just want to remind you that we have open applications right now. Seats are filling up. Go to greatheartsharvesting.org and fill out your application immediately after this live stream. Now, to talk about our curriculum, I have with me two very special friends. Our Chief Academic Officer, Mr. Jacob Tawney, and our National Director of Lower School Curriculum, Mrs. Cami Passy. These are my friends, and I will pass it to Mr. Tawney to explain to us, give us an overview of our curriculum.
Thank you, Mr. Heisman, and families of Baton Rouge, welcome. It's my extreme pleasure to be here. As Sam said, my name is Jake Tawney. I'm the Chief Academic Officer for Great Hearts, and that essentially means that my job is to guard and protect that beautiful curriculum that we have so we can deliver it to families across the country, to your students. And nothing gives us more pleasure than to come talk about this. Now, we could talk about our curriculum probably for hours on end, and certainly when we get to the Q&A, we can field any questions that you have about it. What we thought we'd do for today is, rather than giving some broad overview of all the subjects, we thought we would just do a deep dive into two of the subjects, and that being math and ELA, English Language Arts. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about our lower school math program. That's our Singapore program. And then after that, I will pass it off to my colleague, Cami Passy, who will come talk about our lower school ELA program, two parts of our curriculum that we are really, really proud of. And I think following that, then I'll come back and do just a little bit of an overview of how math and ELA play out as the students move from lower school into the upper school. And after that, that will be plenty for one day. We'll then open it up for the really exciting part, which is the Q&A to address any questions that families have. So with that, let's get started. So our K-5 math program is Singapore Math. Now, some of you may have heard of Singapore, some of you may have not. And so what we thought we'd do is just give a sense of what the program is, and maybe more importantly, why we chose it for the program to teach mathematics to our kindergarten through fifth graders in Harveston. So Singapore Math was developed by the country of Singapore, really prior to about the 1980s. And what happened was Singapore came to realize that their most important natural resource, which is their people, was something worth investing in. And they noticed that the country of Singapore was not performing as well on some of the international assessments in math. And so they took this very seriously and they decided to rewrite their math curriculum. So the number one reason why we chose Singapore Math is because it is effective and it aligns to our philosophy of teaching mathematics. So let's start with its effectiveness. Let's take a look at how Singapore has compared with other programs around the world. So as I mentioned, Singapore became very serious about math instruction, really starting kind of in the late 70s and into the 80s. And as Singapore rolls out its new math program, you start seeing it hang out with a very different group of countries around the world. Moving from the 1980s up into the 1990s, they were doing really significantly better on international assessments. Now, I put this up here not just to see where Singapore rates compared to other countries. There are lots of reasons why a country might rate above or below another country, not to mention the least of which is which of their students are being tested. But I put this up there because this really is a controlled experiment. Because the only thing that happened between the 60s, 70s, and 80s as we move into the 90s in the country of Singapore is that change in curriculum. And what happens is all of a sudden the students of Singapore are doing significantly better. And this program is truly suited for all students. So you can see that as Singapore starts to implement the program, they have a higher percentage of students performing at the advanced level, and then even at the high and medium level. So these are stacked percentages here. So 78% of students in Singapore are performing at the high or advanced level, so high and above, with an astounding 94% performing at the medium level or above. This is a program that really takes students who might struggle a little bit with math, but also students who seems for math that comes a little bit more naturally to them, and it really moves students. So that's the first reason why we chose this. The question really, though, is how did they do it? And the way that the Singapore math program is designed is around a few key features. So one is it really commits to going deep on a smaller number of topics. Now, this is not to suggest that Singapore doesn't cover the same material as other programs do, but it does manage to collapse them into a smaller number of threads that move through the program. You know, whenever there's some national call for redoing standards, you know, typically what happens is, you know, the mathematics education community recognizes this fact. They recognize that we're teaching this wide range of topics at a level of depth that is not very good. It's very shallow. And so they end up redoing the standards and somehow end up adding more standards, you know, rather than less. Singapore Math really took the charge seriously to go deep on a smaller number of topics. And the second thing they did was to really bring together sort of the memorization of facts and standard algorithms together with true mathematical problem solving and mathematical thinking. That's really the reason why we like this program at Great Hearts. It really moves students through that memorization, which we think is really important. There are facts that you have to have at the tips of your fingers in order to be successful in any discipline. But it also introduces students from the very earliest ages of problem solving and Socratic reasoning, Socratic dialogue around those problems. And it does it through an approach called the CPA approach. And that stands for concrete, pictorial, and abstract. And I won't go through all the details of this approach, but I do want to go through the bookends of it, right? Starting on the other end, math is an abstract subject. This is why it's so hard for so many students. What Singapore does is to recognize that the best way to learn math is to have concrete physical experiences. So from the very earliest ages, students are going to be learning to add by having physical objects to bring together. So you see here in this slide, a student working with snap blocks. A student is going to have 3 of them in one hand and 2 of them in another, and they're going to snap them together to see that 5 is actually made up of 2 parts, a 2 and a 3. In many ways, I like to say our elementary math program is making little mathematical engineers, little number engineers out of all of the students. Now, again, we do this for 2 reasons. One is its effectiveness. The Singapore program has been shown through this approach to be the most effective way of teaching all students mathematics. But 2, it's a philosophical reason. We want our students to understand that math is grounded in the real. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that mathematical facts are not random things that mathematicians made up as if they just wanted them to be true. No, they're actually true, and we can reason about them being true. That's really important at the very youngest ages. And when we come back and talk about the upper school curriculum, we will see how that same philosophy plays out as we move past that K-5 program and into that upper school program that then culminates in algebra. So the Singapore program has been immensely effective for us. We've been able to use it to move students really through that K-5 program and to provide them with a tremendous level of algebra readiness as they move on into the 6-8 program. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit more later. The last thing that I'll say about math, and you got this sense from that just wonderful video featuring some of our parents, is that at Great Hearts, we would never want to say that we are the liberal arts plus math and science. Right? No, we understand that math and science are a part of the liberal arts. So when we say we are this classical liberal arts education, that includes a commitment to a very robust program in math and science. And then finally, we are committed, fundamentally committed, not only to a robust program, but to a program in which all students can learn, having a high quality curriculum, but all the training provided to our teachers to work with all levels of students to move them through so that they can be successful. And with that, I'd like to pass it to my colleague, Cami Passy, who can lead us through the highlights of the ELA program at the lower school.
Thanks, Jake. So I am tasked with sharing with you our exciting English language arts program. To give you a little bit of a framework, I want to point out that our English language arts program is made up of big bedrock, big chunks. We have a phonics and reading portion of it, and I'll spend a lot of time talking about that because it's foundational. Literature and poetry, and then we have a writing component, which is made up of composition and grammar. So let's start with the basics. We'll start with phonics. So we have adopted the Spalding program, which is a systematic, explicit, and multisensory program for teaching. This is a wonderful slide here. You can see one of our teachers going over phonograms with our students. Anyway, it's a systematic, explicit, and multisensory program. That means that it is paced out in a way that makes sense and that is developmentally appropriate, and the content the students are learning builds appropriately. It's explicit, meaning that we're not just leaving it up to chance as students understand how our language is structured and how it functions. I heard once when I was in my teacher training program many, many years ago that a lot of us who are in education caught how to read. We, as teachers, we just have a natural propensity toward academics, and so we caught how to read. And our task is to help students, is to teach students how to read so that they are taught how to read, that we're not relying on the possibility or the probability that they're just going to pick it up through osmosis. And so that's where the explicit part comes in. So I'll give you a quick example. Our students at the very youngest level in kindergarten begin right away by learning the basic sounds of the English language. They learn them as phonograms. It's the connection between the sound and the grapheme and the written letter combinations. So for an example, the letter A, as we know it, says 3 sounds: a, ah, and our kindergartners learn that right off the bat. And then we can get into multi-letter phonograms like O-U-G-H, which has 6 sounds to it: o, oo, uff, off, ah, ow. That's one of my students' favorites as they learn it. It's like falling down the stairs, the things you say when you fall down the stairs. In addition to learning the symbol and sound correspondence, they learn how to write. In fact, the teacher guide for Spalding is called The Writing Road to Reading, because research has shown and experience has shown that engaging students in multi-sensory experiences really cements the learning. So they see the sounds and the letters together, they see and hear them together, they model them on their fingers, they start working through words and syllabicating them as they get a little bit older, and they are writing from day one. So students spend time not only learning the sounds of language, but also proper letter formation. Writing is a huge component of Spalding, and it helps our students be able to dive into the beauty and the order of our language at the word level. So then we take what they're learning in phonics and we continue to build on it through writing. I'll start with with grammar, with helping students understand syntax and parts of speech. In grades K2, grades kindergarten through second grade rather, students are learning grammar more organically. They're really learning the parts of speech. They're learning proper syntax and sentences. They're learning what sounds right about our language. And they're not really doing an explicit dive into grammar. It's more organic. But starting in third grade, we really start going into analysis, where students will dive deeply into the parts of speech in a given sentence. They learn to analyze it. They learn chants, and they learn how each word functions in a sentence. And by the time they get into fourth grade, they start moving into more formal diagramming. And then the other part of writing is composition. It's the actual production of writing that communicates ideas. And the younger grades, our goal is for them to experience beautifully constructed sentences and to copy those beautifully constructed sentences, to really get it into their brains before they start producing their own individual writing. And so we focus on copy work, dictation, narration, and summary. And then as the students get a better sense of what it is to write beautifully and to write well, they will begin producing their own writing with a variety of topics, a variety of conventions for creating their own writing, such as original narration. They learn how to outline. They start doing analysis in scientific discoveries. And writing really is integrated across the curriculum. The last piece of our program is the piece that we're excited about all of it, but the piece that really brings it in and really helps us, it sets us apart in terms of what we offer to our students, which is our Classics to Keep, which is our literature. We have intentionally curated lists of titles that immerse our students in beautiful, humane stories with elevated but developmentally appropriate language. So for example, our kindergartners engage in books such as Little Bear, Mouse Soup, and The Velveteen Rabbit. Our second graders, one of the most favorite books that our students come away having experienced in second grade is Charlotte's Web. And then in fifth grade, one of my absolute favorites teaching as a former fifth grade teacher in the Great Heart Schools is Where the Red Fern Grows. And our goal for the ELA program is to help our students be able to learn the basic skills that they need, also learn the beauty and order of language to be able to engage in the great conversations and lead them to being able to engage in reading the great books as they get older. So with that, as Jake mentioned, we're just going to do a deep dive in just ELA and math. I'm going to kick it back over to Jake so he can talk about the progression into middle school.
Great. Thanks, Cami. So hopefully that gave you a pretty good sense of how we run mathematics in our K-5 program and then how we run ELA in our K-5 program. I'm going to combine the two a little bit here because I would be remiss if we didn't talk about how that lower school program moves as students themselves move up into the upper school. But again, we'll focus just on math and ELA. So in math, once students have completed the Singapore program in fifth grade, they're going to come into the sixth grade and get into a program called Carnegie Mathematics. Now, like Singapore, Carnegie Mathematics is research-based, and so we know that students can be successful, that all students can be successful in moving through this program. It's, of course, a much more mature presentation than Singapore is because students themselves are more mature. But like Singapore, not only is it research-based, but it aligns to the way in which we think about educating students. And by that, I mean the Carnegie program is naturally Socratic. So where the Singapore program introduces students to concrete manipulatives into a fundamental anchor task that they can dialogue around and discover mathematical truths around, and yet at the same time, memorize their facts and learn the standard algorithms, all of that is true in Carnegie, with the exception of the concrete manipulative. Because at this point, students themselves are a good bit more abstract. But in Carnegie, we still have that foundational problem. Because all mathematics should begin with a problem and students working together with the teacher in Socratic dialogue with one another in order to solve that problem. We have this fundamental belief that all mathematics should start with a problem. It should arise out of a need. So it's not simply just telling students some random fact that they're uninterested in and then therefore don't learn very well. No, rather, students should experience mathematics. right? Now, this is not to say that we just let them sink or swim. There's a guided dialogue that happens through the Carnegie program itself that the teacher leads the students through in order to discover those mathematical truths. The Carnegie program begins in that 6th grade and then moves through a pre-algebra class into the 8th grade where all students take algebra. So that middle school level of mathematics culminates in the study of algebra. We believe that that is the right time for students to have their first experience with a truly abstract branch of mathematics. We all remember that when we first had letters introduced into our mathematics instruction. Now, for some of us, that may have been very confusing, but keep in mind that Singapore program through K-5 is designed specifically for algebra readiness, so that Carnegie can pick up the mantle and continue educating the students under that guidance of a teacher through middle school. And then when students make their way into high school, they will have a geometry experience, algebra 2, and all students will get to calculus. We do believe that calculus is the pinnacle of Western mathematics, and all students deserve exposure to that, deserve to understand the basic ideas of calculus, because they're beautiful. They're beautiful culminations of the algebra and geometry that came before them. What about ELA? So nobody is better at talking through that K-5 program than Cami Passy. Just like Singapore is oriented towards getting students ready for a more mature presentation of math, so too our K-5 ELA program is moving students from learning how to read to then reading in order to learn. By the time we hit that 6-8 program, it's time to give them a more mature presentation of writing and of reading. And so the composition program in 6-8 starts to move the students from mastering that paragraph to mastering the essay. And the literature starts to become more mature as students continue their exploration of the great works of literature in human history through reading books like The Wind in the Willows, A Christmas Carol, Beowulf, To Kill a Mockingbird. And every year, starting in 6th grade, students have some experience with the works of William Shakespeare, because that is the absolute pinnacle of English literature. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention where our ELA study is headed as students make their way into high school, into that humane letters experience. When they study the truly great works, from Dickens to Dostoevsky, from Aristotle to Austen, when they engage for 2 hours a day in conversation around the best that has been said and written, as they themselves are plunged into that great conversation by discussing and then by writing about those great works of literature. It truly is where Great Hearts Harveston is headed. So hopefully that gave you at least something of a deep dive into our math and ELA program. We are happy to field questions that continue that deep dive in math and ELA, but we're also happy to field questions that start to span the other subject areas that we didn't get a chance to talk about. Our commitment to science, the language instruction that we have, the fine arts, the history instruction. And so with that, I will kick this back to my friend and colleague, Sam Heisman, to MC and facilitate our Q&A section.
Every once in a while, gets us all, the muted mic. All right. Thank you, Jake. I appreciate you and Cami making yourselves available to outline our curriculum. As a Great Hearts parent, somebody who has 4 children in the lower school, I can attest to its life-changing power and to the curiosity it cultivates in our children. Let's go ahead and field some questions. Jake, I'm going to throw this one your way. Let's bring up Cami as well as we get these questions. We'll bring up Ms. Passy. How are teachers trained to teach this curriculum? How are teachers trained to teach this curriculum?
Yeah.
Miss, why don't we go ahead and start with Mr. Tawney, and then we'll work to Cami.
It's a really great question, and I'll give some highlights, and then maybe I'll let Cami fill in some particulars of that phonics training, because nowhere in our curriculum do you see more of a robust training than our phonics program. I really appreciate this question because the formula for a really great life-changing education is actually really simple, though it can be hard to effect. And it starts with a high-quality curriculum. But then it has to move into good instruction, right? On top of that, by the way, we also have to have a robust intervention system that plays with both the curriculum and the instruction. But right there in the center of it is the teacher. We really do believe that classroom is about high quality instruction, and you cannot get that if you do not have robust training. And so this training begins with what I am convinced is the nation's most intense new faculty orientation. As we bring our teachers in for several weeks ahead of time, for 8 hours a day, just to train them in the Great Hearts way of thinking. But then more importantly, we move very quickly into the practical things that they need in order to teach well. And here's where I would say Great Hearts is different than a lot of other systems out there. We do the philosophical orientation, yes, and we do basic teaching techniques, how to manage a classroom. But the thing that we offer is subject level training. So we will invest in teachers in sometimes small groups, if we're talking about, say, algebra training, sometimes large group if we're talking about Singapore math training, because that's every teacher is teaching that in grades K through 5. But we will give them hours upon hours of specific training in that curriculum, shoring up their knowledge of the subject, and most certainly making sure that they get a deep dive into the teaching techniques. That's the start, getting them a foundation that they can build on for their training. After that, we have an entire robust system of online training videos that go even deeper than we have time to do in our summer program. And that's through a program that we call our Teacher Resource Portal, where teachers get all of their material resources, the tests and the quizzes and the lesson outlines, but they also get, again, course-specific video training on how to teach that course. And the final piece that I would put in there is the head of school and the head of school's leadership team is charged with being in classrooms constantly. We have an open door policy in our classrooms. A teacher knows to expect that a school leader will be in that classroom on any given day. And that is not to administrate, and that is not simply to monitor. It is to really coach the teachers and to build on that robust training that they got. With that, Cami, do you want to give just a few highlights of, say, something like our phonics training, and that might give them a more concrete idea of what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I would love to. Our phonics training was developed by a woman named Margie Klaus, who was trained under Romalda Spalding, she will have you know. And the phonics training is incredibly robust. It's about a week's worth of training, 8 hours for the first 2 days, and then half days for the rest of the week. And teachers are doing the phonics program themselves. They're learning all the phonograms. They're tested on the phonograms. They learn the different classroom routines that happen, and they are monitored and given feedback on those things. And so one of the things that Jake has always said as I've worked with him is that you cannot divorce content from pedagogy. And Spalding is a really wonderful example of that. It is through the routines and the procedures of the day-to-day life in a Spalding lesson that students and teachers really learn the fundamentals of the language. And Spalding training continues through, as Jake mentioned, the Teacher Resource Portal. We no longer have Marie working with us. She retired, as she gets to do, I suppose. But she developed online training videos as well. So schools are able to use those to brush up teacher knowledge. Teachers can go in and review the phonograms. It's actually one of the most intense training programs I've ever been through, and I've been teaching for about 18 years. Yeah, I think that's a good place to stop with that. Sam, is there anything else that you'd like us to highlight in terms of this question?
No, I think that's a good general overview. I can say on a personal level, as a school administrator, a teacher myself, school level training, school level observation, mentoring, and coaching, not just in the classroom, but in individual moments with children, in calls home to parents, and in our procedures school-wide, from pickup to drop-off, is a point of emphasis for our team, and is something we'll take the utmost of care and making sure our teachers are equipped to provide not just a pleasant school experience, but a rigorous and vigorous one. We got another question here. We got one from the chat. My eyes are getting old. Let me just maximize this. Will band be offered? My daughter loves band. Let's cover the music question, Mr. Tawney. Will band be offered?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thank you for that. I really appreciate it. So band is not offered as a course in our curriculum. We focus on the study of voice. We focus on that instrument that comes with us wherever we go. We see that as really a foundational element of learning music. Our music program, of course, includes also a history of music and music theory, and that really begins in kindergarten all the way up through the 12th grade. Our schools do have extracurricular opportunities for students who play in instruments, and so that opportunity is there. But the music that we focus on in our curriculum is voice.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tawney. Another question from the chat. Will there be a transition time for completely different ways of thinking? I'm going to make sure I understand this, try to rephrase it here. And if Mr. Worley, if you'd like to enter clarification in the chat while I'm rephrasing, please go ahead and do so. For students starting in mid-level classes, I'm taking that to mean middle school. Will there be transition time for completely different ways of thinking, or from going from mathematics to literature, or from mathematics to fine arts, or PE for that matter? Different ways of thinking, different ways of learning. There will indeed be transition time in between our middle school classes. We find it, yes, essential for them to intellectually reset for the next class, but also it's a good time for them to connect with their teachers and their friends on the way to the next class. It's a good time for them to take care of basic human essentials on the way to the next class. There will indeed be transition time, and the teachers will be out in the hallway smiling and ready to help. Mr. Tawney and Ms. Passy, I got another question that was submitted. Will this curriculum challenge my student who's in the gifted and talented program? Will this curriculum challenge my gifted and talented student?
Yeah, another really, really important question, because we do say at Great Hearts, and we fundamentally believe this, that the best education is for everybody. Right. And so if we believe that, then we really have to make good on that promise, which means we have to have an educational model that helps students who struggle in certain disciplines and helps students who don't struggle in certain disciplines. So again, a little like the last question, I'll talk through this generally. And then Ms. Passy, you spent a good bit of time teaching in one of our elementary school grades. I thought it would be good to hear some of your personal experience with this. But the answer is yes. The curriculum will very much challenge students who have been identified as gifted and talented. This is true for a variety of reasons. One, you keep in mind the literature that we're offering to students is typically well above the grade level that you're going to find in other schools. Now, the next natural question will be, what if my student struggles with that? Well, again, we have robust intervention programs that can help students, with that. But rarely does a student not feel challenged by the literature that we have there. So that's one answer. Two, I would suggest that the Socratic method itself becomes the tool by which a teacher differentiates instruction in the classroom. And that is really important. That's part of that robust training that we talk about. We train our teachers to differentiate instruction within the classroom, either by the particular problems that they're giving students during their independent practice time, by some of the homework problems they're asking students to think about, but also just naturally in the way that they dig into explanations with students. And that is true in Singapore at the K-5 level, where you're really digging in with an individual student, interlocking with them to make sure that they understand, going deeper with them as they start to try to solve a problem. But it's also true as we make our way all the way up into high school, when students are discussing, say one of the Platonic dialogues. A student who for whom this comes more naturally ends up going deeper into that subject, right? Deeper into that work. And so the curriculum that we have and the teaching that we have is naturally suited towards a true differentiation in the classroom. Now, that doesn't mean that it comes naturally, and that's part of that teacher training that we do. And we have, again, decades of experience in really working with a classroom that has a wide range of students, from those who need more support to those who need more challenge. Cami, do you want to talk a little bit about your personal experience with this in an elementary school class?
Who doesn't love talking about themselves? So yes, of course. For some context, since y'all don't know me, I taught 5th grade with Great Hearts after having taught in a district school before I joined the network. And I can give you some specific examples of I want to be careful of the word rigor. Sometimes there's some misunderstanding about that. I've heard the word vigor, which I actually prefer. One of the books we read my first year teaching with Great Hearts was Treasure Island, which is actually now on our middle school list. But man, did that open us up to some incredible conversations around the nature of goodness and how it manifests in the world and what it means to be a good person, and if it's all about your behavior and all about the outcomes. And so being able to engage students at a 5th grade level in these conversations that they're really, really hungry to have is such a beautiful and an invigorating thing. Mathematics, I've always loved teaching mathematics. So being able to engage with my students in the observation of the concrete, as Jake talked about, when our approach to mathematics is starting with concrete and moving to pictorial abstract, right? And I remember a particular lesson where we had investigated the array model of multiplication. Don't worry about all the details there. But I had a student who was very curious if we could use the same framework for division. And he went home and tried to work on it and couldn't figure it out. He came back and asked me about it. So we actually sat in during recess. It was his choice, not mine. Recess, to talk about if we could apply the same framework, the same array model to division that we did multiplication, which opened up this incredible discussion around the different properties around multiplication and division. Gosh, there's so many examples of being able to engage students at a variety of levels and elevated levels. Socratic method of questioning really is an incredible and efficient way to be able to engage our students at the highest level. By asking students to explain their thinking, by asking students to be able to provide other examples that may be like the example that they're looking at in mathematics or in science. I could keep going on, but we have other questions coming up. So ask me to talk about myself again and I'll keep going. But I'll go ahead and bring that back to Sam.
Sure. Cami, I'm actually going to come right back to you here in a minute.
Oh, good.
I think we've got some clarity from Mr. Worley, and I appreciate it. Mid-level being 4th grade, will they get transition time as they are coming from schools that have a different approach, that have a different academic program and different cultural standards, et cetera? Will there need to be a transition period or time?
What a great question. I think it's a wonderful question. We've been doing this for a long time. I've been part of the network for 10 years, so we've got this. We understand what it is for students to be coming into our programs at any level. And at the elementary school level, the nature of our programs, Mr. Worley, really actually helps students acclimate pretty quickly. Any good teacher will tell you this: the first 2 weeks of school it's really important at the elementary level, especially, to establish routines and expectations and habits. And so our teachers are trained to do that with our students. So from day one, our students are invited into the culture of the classroom to help build it and to help support it, but to really understand it. And then the programs that we have, Spalding, spirals in that we start with the basics. It doesn't matter if they've been doing Spalding since kindergarten. We always start with handwriting and a phonogram review. With Singapore, there are expectations and norms around using manipulatives, which is a really, really good way to get students into that way of thinking. Our teachers learn from the first day of their training, they learned about the Socratic method. And so they transfer that to their classrooms as well. So the short answer is the transition starts from day one. Our teachers set expectations and build the culture with that. That's a great question. I'm glad that you asked.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's a great question to provide. It's a great question, Mr. Worley. Thank you. I think Cami answered it well. Our teachers are there to not just provide a time to catch up, but are there to really lift the students up such that interim time is just shortened quite a bit. We're there to intervene as much as possible and to invite them in that rich culture. All right. Got another question here. It's rather a series of questions. Will the tests mostly be multiple choice or open? Will the majority of material be presented through visually pleasing textbooks rather than black and white photocopies? Will the school have an on-site library? Jake, I'm going to answer that last one first. We will indeed have an on-site library. Yes, very, very good. We'll have a library upstairs and then a bookstop downstairs. So in a way, we'll have two, 1.5. Jake and Cammie, I'm sure you both have questions to or answers to these two questions that I did not answer. Will the tests be multiple choice or open, and will there be visually pleasing textbooks rather than black and white photocopies? Unmute, Jake. Unmute.
Happy to field this. So will the tests be mostly multiple choice or open questions? They will be mostly open questions. We really believe our theory of assessment is a couple things, right? One, an assessment is there to give the teacher information on how the student is doing, to give the student information on how the student is doing. That's sort of the obvious thing about an assessment, and that remains true. But there are two other reasons why we give students tests and quizzes. And one of them is that the test itself should be a learning opportunity, right? When you take a test, you actually are engaged in an act of learning. This is why, by the way, studying flashcards is more effective than studying a list of vocabulary, because a flashcard is a mini quiz. And so we think that tests should be designed in a way that actually helps students learn, not just evaluates what they've learned. And the final reason that we give an assessment is that it communicates to students what's important in a class. And so if we believe that thinking through problems and expressing a coherent, rational answer to a problem is important as we dialogue Socratically with students, then there better be those opportunities to do that same thing on an assessment. Otherwise, we don't really think it's important. So most of the tests will be that open-ended kind of question format there. Will the majority of material be presented through visually pleasing textbooks rather than black and white photocopies? So the short answer there is well, it's twofold. The short answer is yes. The material that's in the textbook should be visually appealing. We do actually think that aesthetics are important, right? We think that's important actually in a variety of ways, not just in the use of color versus black and white, but just also in the the avoiding of kitschy stuff. We think that we're engaged in a serious activity of learning with students, and students deserve to be presented with beautiful ideas that are presented in beautiful ways. That's also, by the way, why we teach cursive. It's not just simply so students can sign their names or read the Declaration of Independence, though that is true. The real reason we teach cursive is that beautiful ideas deserve to be written in beautiful script, right? And then I know Sam answered it, but I just can't help myself here. Will the school have an on-site library? Parents, we love books. We absolutely love books. We believe that students should have books that they can hold, books that they can flip the pages in, that they can then physically write notes to notate in. With John Adams, my goal in life is that I die surrounded by my books. And my goal for the students of Great Hearts Harveston is that they end up with that same love, that same reverence, that piety for the actual book. So we don't have learning centers, right? We certainly have some computers in the schools, of course, but we haven't replaced the library, with a learning center. We really want students to have access to real things, physical things, real ideas that are written into those books. And we're very proud of that fact. So thank you for prompting that question, because it gives us a chance to talk again about something that we really, truly love.
Excellent. Excellent. Parents, we have so enjoyed this time with you, getting to talk about one of the things we love most, our curriculum, second only to the dear students that we're going to serve. We've absolutely loved the time that we've had with you. We are also hopeful that you'll take the opportunity to go to greatheartsharveston.org and fill out an application. Please do so. Spots are filling as we speak. I've actually been watching the ticker as we have been broadcasting. Spots are filling as we speak. So please do, if you haven't already, fill out the application and become a further part of our community. We'll touch base with you very soon thereafter. But again, it has been such a pleasure to talk about the Great Hearts curriculum and the difference that it makes and how it sets us apart. As always, please do not hesitate to reach out if you have any questions at info@greatheartsharveston.org. info@greatheartsharveston.org. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Cammie, for being with us and telling us about the Great Hearts curriculum. Have a great night.